Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
I've been going out with a girl, her name is Julie, but last night she said to me when we were watching telly.
Boris, in my view, took a very wise decision not to appear on the talking heads, which essentially led to a load of sound bites and a lack of substance from each and every one of them. He was very aware of the fact that he would have been criticised, as you are now criticising all the people who attended, that they weren't able to say anything.
Actually, I was just defending them. I was just defending Michael Gove from Claire's criticism and praising Rory Stewart. I haven't mentioned any of the others yet, Richard. I don't know what programme you've been listening to.
Well,
who have I criticised? Who have I criticised?
First of all, I'd like your evidence.
Who have I criticised? Who have I criticised this morning?
Whoa, could you just calm down?
I'm being super calm, my friend. Who have I criticised this morning from last night's debate?
When you're calm, you don't talk over people. So I'm trying to be calm with you.
Okay, mate. So I'll ask you again. I'm not talking over you. Who have I criticised?
Where is your evidence that...
who have I criticised?
You criticised
Boris Johnson fan speaks. Yes, I criticised Boris Johnson for not being there. Okay, tell me who I've criticised. Tell me who I've criticised, Mr. Angry.
Stop talking over me, you rude man.
Answer my question.
Well, I will if you listen.
Good. Who have I criticised?
2 ears, 1 mouth.
Who have I criticised? Oh, Richard, this is hilarious. Who have I criticised this morning?
Listen. Oh, you're a clever man. You don't listen. Are you prepared to listen?
Yes, I am. To you telling me who I've criticised this morning from last night's debates.
Right. Be quiet for 15 seconds.
Certainly not. As soon as you answer my question, you've come on here, you've said the reason he didn't do it was because he knew he'd get criticised like you've been criticising all of them this morning. I just want to know who you've heard me criticise.
Where is your evidence that he was terrified?
He wasn't there, you prune.
Listen, prune face, where is your evidence?
So I haven't criticised anybody, and the man who didn't turn up was terrified. Richard, let me make a I don't want to go out on a limb here, my friend. You voted Brexit, right? And you like Boris Johnson. Yes or no?
Well, you like
Oh, he's off.
Marxist.
29 minutes after 10. What a funny little fella. So, the reason why I categorically haven't criticised any of the contenders in last night's candidate debate, and I apologise, apparently I have to explain this again for the hard of thinking, is because I didn't watch it. Therefore, the only person I can criticise is the person that was too frit to turn up. But if you are now so morally and intellectually compromised that you're pretending that not turning up is somehow a sign of anything other than cowardice, then you end up appearing on national radio and making a complete muppet of yourself. Richard, please ring me again. Seriously, I'm beginning to worry that there's not enough comedy on the programme during these difficult political times. In the meantime, on the bright side, your day can't get any worse. How can, and sentient, decent, honest people, and I use those words a little more, perhaps cautiously than I would have done previously, but we're talking about members of the Conservative Party, so I know a lot of you will already object to that description. But how can 63% of Conservative members value Brexit, which they can't describe, as being, well, something so valuable to them that they don't mind Scotland leaving the United Kingdom? Brexit being something so valuable to them that they don't mind significant damage to the UK economy. Ditto Northern Ireland. I just want to know what's on the other side of the scales. What do you get in return for these prices? Because these are costs, right? Nobody wants this, but it's a price worth paying. And they're answering these questions in the 60s, 59%, 63%, 61%. Peter is in Finchley. Peter, can you make sense of it?
Yes, good afternoon. I think I certainly can, and I'm rather distressed you're so often economical with the truth.
Okay.
Why? Firstly, you keep on saying that people will be happy if Scotland and Ireland are left the United Kingdom.
Well, let's go with the phrase I just used. Let's go with price worth paying.
Let's talk. You said they would be happy. I don't know. I didn't see the poll. I don't know what the question was. I very much doubt if people who responded said they would be happy.
Well, the exact question is, would you rather Brexit took place even if it caused this scenario? So I'm happy to use whatever words you want. So let's
No, but you've used the word happy.
Well, I'm happy to not use it. So let's not talk.
Well, you've done the damage now because a lot of your listeners have taken that on board.
Okay, so here are two choices. No, Peter, I'm sorry, mate. I've tried to accommodate your complaint. I've said we don't have to use the word happy if you want. Now I'm going to explain why I used the word happy. Here are two choices. One is the choice that you make, and one is the choice that you don't make. What is your choice? Choice X, therefore, I used the word happy to describe the thing that you want. Now, I'm perfectly happy to say they're going to be really, really unhappy, but they still want it. So you're now telling me I should have said people are voting to be unhappy.
No.
Yes.
What I'm saying...
Because you can't say happy.
I was merely correcting you.
Well, I'm now correcting you. Are these people going to be unhappy? Are these people going to be unhappy?
I think they may be unhappy.
Well, then let's say that then. It's even madder than it was before. They're voting to be unhappy. Now tell me what they get in return.
Let me finish, please.
I am.
You're not.
Oh, why do we always have to do this?
White people might have voted the way they do is because the future for the European Union may be far more bleak than you're painting it. The unemployment rate for young people in many of the countries is extraordinarily high.
Oh, God.
And going to get higher.
Yeah.
Well, Well, is that a fact or not?
No. When it says significant damage to the UK economy, that question means it will be significant damage to the UK economy as a result of leaving the European Union.
There may be damage on the short term.
Where do you get short term from, Mr. Pedant? Must use the right words.
Where is short term? Probably, unfortunately, most politicians in this country only...
No, where do you get short term from? Because I know how strict you are about using the correct words.
I said maybe. Maybe.
So maybe, and so it may be forever.
It's unlikely to be forever.
Where do you get your confidence from?
Because an old man, I've seen booms and busts, I've seen lots of things go wrong, and some things go right. And they can go right.
Yes, so why does 61% of Conservative Party members consider significant damage to the UK economy a price worth paying for Brexit? Because it can't have anything to do with thinking that staying in will be worse economically.
I think the damage being done to the UK economy staying in European Union.
Oh, mate, I can't listen. I can only explain it to you. I can't understand it for you. This question. No, I know that if you understand it, you have to abandon a lifetime of conviction. But let me at least try to explain it to you.
It's not a lifetime of conviction.
Well, you just brought your age into the equation for reasons I don't really understand.
The first referendum...
No, listen, Peter, pay attention, all right? This is important. It might not be too late for you. When they say they would rather Brexit took place, even if it caused significant damage to the UK economy, they are categorically stating that the economic situation would be worse than if we stayed in the European Union. So you can't say, oh, the way to understand this is because they think that the economic situation will be worse if we stay in the European Union. You are now literally arguing on national radio that black is white. So we'll try again. What do they get in return for economic damage? What's the benefit?
Well, I don't think there will be economic damage, personally.
Oh, my God. So you've rung in to explain the thinking of the people who are happy to accept economic damage by saying that you don't think there will be any. Did you just hear yourself?
I don't think there will be.
Well, you can't keep repeating it. It doesn't make what you're saying any more sensible. I'm asking you to explain the mindset of people who are not happy, but prepared to accept significant economic damage to the UK economy in return for Brexit. Do you understand why saying that you don't think there will be any is not an answer to the question that I'm asking?
Trying to answer on their behalf...
That's what you rang in to do. At the beginning of the call, you said, I can do this, I can make sense of this. You can't answer this question by saying...
For many people...
Oh, Peter.
For many people... Money is not the ultimate goal in life.
No.
What
is it, do you think?
They accept that there's sometimes we may go through economic problems, but...
Yeah, so what do they get in return?
Well, get in return, hopefully, if we have decent leadership...
Now, you see, you can't use words like hopefully and decent if I'm not allowed to use the word happy.
What we get is a responsive government to the people of the United Kingdom. And they're not a responsive government at the moment.
In what way?
They don't respond to the true needs of the people.
For example? So the true needs of the people will be better met after significant damage to the UK economy?
They could be. They could be.
So you think we'll be able to meet the needs? I just know, hang on, because I know how important words are to you. You think that we'll be able to do a better job of looking after the people in this country if we're poorer?
No, I think we'll do a better job socially, morally, and in many other respects.
Could you give me an example?
If we're not in the European
Give me an example, could you?
Yes, sure. Well, I'll take a simple example.
Yes.
Housing. In 1997, the population of this country was 54 million.
Are we going immigration?
I'm not against immigrants. I'm against...
Immigrants who live in houses. Just the ones that live in houses?
Pardon?
Just the ones that live in houses you've got a problem with?
No, that's a stupid thing.
So why are you talking about houses then?
Because when we had a population of 54 million...
Yeah.
And it was declining...
Yes.
Because the birth rate wasn't high enough,
yes.
Then we would have been forced, or
yes.
the employers would have been forced to employ modern production techniques,
but you're here to defend significant damage to the UK economy. You can't say we'll be able to pay for modern production techniques as a result of significant damage to the UK economy.
We could stop spending what we are spending with the European Union.
Yes, as you well know, we take a lot more in commerce and trade.
In this country.
Okay. And the economic analysis that paints that as plausible comes from where? Because I know that every impact assessment undertaken by the actual government portrays the polar opposite position to the one you described.
Honestly, with the governments that we've had, the load of dopeheads that we've had of recent years, I don't think they can negotiate.
So which politicians do you like, Peter?
Well, quite honestly, as I said, I think they're all dopeheads.
Okay.
I think we could do with a complete change.
Yes.
And right across the board, I think there's too many people who are influenced by the drugs that they've taken.
Okay. I'd like to say this conversation had taken a surreal turn, but I suspect it started on that tip. So just to be clear, you blame the state of British politics on the drugs that the politicians have taken? And
many others, yes.
Yes, okay.
Well, look at the...
No, I can't take any more of this. Stop it. It's 12:45. Let's start off in Southampton. Tony is there. Tony, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi, James.
Hello,
well, I'm new to RBC. I drove to work today as opposed to got the train. So I've listened to your station, have friends who listen avidly to you. First of all, James, I'd like to respond to a great point you made about entitlement and preciousness in the upper middle classes or aristocracy even. Now, yes, Boris, I'm aware of Boris's background and absolutely no resonance there. That I have nothing in common in terms of his background. But, you know, we met someone ultra posh, beyond posh recently, my wife and I, and her question was, you were born with a silver spoon in your mouth, weren't you? And his answer was unforgettable. He said, I was born with a whole drawful, darling. And, you know, it was the honesty of saying that's who I am. And, you know, I think Boris, I've never observed that Boris has stepped back from that. He's not denied his... No,
this is clearly my fault. I don't think I'm disputing anything you're saying. I haven't heard him acknowledge the role that luck has played in his life, but I'm interested more in the future, I think, and the things, reasons to be cheerful about the prospects of his premiership.
Well, accident of birth, you should say. Reasons to be cheerful. I think the country needs someone who's going to execute now, someone who's going to do something, as opposed to, forgive the term, the sort of intellectual masturbation that goes on and that's gone on too long. He will.
This doesn't really. That doesn't really mean anything. What do you think he's going to deliver?
I think you have to also have confidence in the very senior team around him, experienced seasoned team around him.
He hasn't appointed it yet, Tony. I'm sorry if I'm badgering you, but he hasn't got a team around him yet. He's got Linton Crosby, the Australian election guru, pulling all sorts of strings behind the scenes at the minute. But and of course, that people will want jobs in his cabinet. But you know that he'll have talented colleagues isn't really what I would suggest necessarily is what you want as the primary qualification of your leader.
We live in an imperfect world, and Boris
he's going to be picking his top team from the same pool that Theresa May did.
Well, we don't know that, but I do know...
We do. In the context of the cabinet, we do. You can only choose your cabinet from serving Conservative MPs. I think you can chuck a lord in as well, or a lady, but it's the same pool that Theresa May...
Okay.
110%. So I appreciate... What you said is he'll get things done. What things?
Yes. Well, I think we also acknowledge that this country has the best civil service in the world, so that...
Well, Brexiters don't acknowledge that. Brexiters think the civil service are all traitors and the enemy of their cause. But just let me push you on what he's going to get done, because at the moment you've praised his putative team and you've praised the civil service. You haven't told me anything about him that's admirable.
Well, you mentioned the Olympic Games. The government mission was to deliver a safe and secure Olympic Games. Boris was at the helm.
He wasn't in the government.
Well, he achieved that as Lord Mayor of London.
He wasn't Lord Mayor of London.
My apologies. As Mayor of London, I think he did a sterling job. And I think, I
mean, Sebastian Coe would probably disagree with you in the context of who did the heavy lifting and who did the work, and certainly in the context of who secured the Olympics for London in 2012. The answer is not Boris Johnson. And of course, the Olympics are an exceptional event, so let's pretend it was entirely 100% down to Boris Johnson. That makes him very good at event planning. It means he'd be a good bloke to organise your wedding. Just give me something that proves he could run a country really well from his own past.
I think Brexit is a huge event. Also, I met the man once.
Brexit, you can't really be comparing Brexit to the Olympics, Tony. I appreciate you've not been on before, so I won't haul you over the coals for that. Just from his own past, is because he's had high office as Foreign Secretary and as Mayor of London, what would you point to as evidence that he'll be a good Prime Minister?
I actually don't support him because of his charisma and his...
I'm just going to push you now, because I've got a lot of other people waiting. Yeah. Okay, you think he'll appoint good people. You think we've got an excellent civil service. You met some bloke who was very posh once, and you and your wife liked him, and you think he's got... You're not voting for him because of his charisma. So just for the avoidance of doubt, 8 years as mayor, 3 or 4 years as foreign secretary, one of the best-known politicians in the country for as long as most of us can remember, what do you point at as the achievement, the political achievement that qualifies him to be Prime Minister?
Well, if you ask that question of any of the...
Well, I've asked you 7 times now, so if you could just have a crack at answering it, and then we can both get on with our day.
No, I appreciate that, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Go on then, just one thing.
He's got my vote.
Yes, I know he has, but the achievement that you point to as evidence of his quality as a leader.
I think he did a marvellous job as Mayor of London.
Yes, the achievement. The political achievement. So, whether you could point at, I don't know, you could point at a treaty that was signed, or you could point at clean air legislation that was brought in, or child poverty decreasing, or exam grades going. I don't know what, but you must know one thing, because you love the guy.
Well, in the Agape sense of the word, but actually, I don't love him as such.
No, just one achievement, Tony. One achievement.
Well, achievement is right now that he's mustered the support of so many...
That's not a political achievement, that's a popularity contest, and we all agree that he's popular. So, 8 years as mayor, 3 or 4 years as foreign secretary, other jobs in politics, what do you point at and say, look, give the guy a break, he achieved what, Tony?
Well, I would go back to what I say, that if you...
I'd really rather you didn't, because you haven't said anything yet, so just the achievement.
The achievement of rallying around serving members of Parliament...
But we know he's popular. What's the political achievement, Tony?
But I don't think they voted for his popularity. I think they voted for his...
yes, so what's the achievement, Tony? You can tell me that you can't think of one, and then you can put yourself out of your misery, but until then, I'm going to keep saying, what is the crowning achievement of his political career? Foreign Secretary. Let's forget Mayor. Let's go as Foreign Secretary. What was his best achievement as Foreign Secretary?
Well, no comment on that, but I think it's yet to come, James.
Right, there we go. So, nothing. Fingers crossed, everybody. I'm feeling very silly this morning because I'm 99% sure that if a pro-fox hunting protester had breached security at the Mansion House speech when Gordon Brown was Chancellor of the Exchequer, and my studio guest this morning, David Miliband, who was Foreign Secretary at the time, had sort of grabbed her by the throat and then pushed her up against a pillar and manhandled her out of the room, I'd be disgusted.
I wouldn't care what party the politician belonged to or what the source of the protest was. But I'm also 99.9% sure that all of the reaction, or most of the reaction I've seen this morning so far, is based almost entirely upon the who of this ugly story rather than the what of it. And just by way of almost perfect illustration, it really is perfect illustration of how absolutely bovine this sort of side picking is. Here is a chap called Piers Corbyn tweeting earlier today. Piers Corbyn, of course, is the brother of Jeremy Corbyn. So you can decide which, quotes, side, end quotes, you think he's on. He tweets this morning, "The real question is how should brainwashed, deranged Extinction Rebellion protesters who are manipulated to help rob and control us all by the world's richest, most evil globalist forces be dealt with? They need psychiatric help." And, of course, Jeremy Corbyn is not his brother's keeper, but in terms of lazy polarisation and side-picking, I thought that might be interesting. Well, what's happened to us? You just... Also, have a look at my Twitter now, at Mr. James OB, because more footage has emerged of a much bigger picture, and there are other protesters and other men dealing with the female protesters in ways that, on a scale of 1 to 10, would hit about 2. If Mark Field is at 7 or 8, with the nature and the apparent loss of control and the anger of his reaction, all the other protesters are being dealt with at a 1 or a 2. They are being held, their arms are being held, they're being led away from the fray, but they're not being in any way treated like Mark Field chose to treat this woman, which is why he has unreservedly apologised. He acknowledges that he really messed up. Rush of blood to the head. So why are people defending him? 0345 6060 973. Let's go to the Faroe Islands. We don't take enough calls from the Faroe Islands. Daniel is in there, in Torshaven. Daniel, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Morning. First of all, I'd like to say that I don't support the violence towards women at all. However, what
is there a however there now, Daniel? Really?
No, right? Yeah, but let me finish. Let me finish. In the situation of Mark Field, Sadiq Khan and the press are undermining the security of our politicians. And the reason
Sadiq Khan is undermining the security of our politicians.
Yeah.
Can you just explain?
With his comments.
Which comments?
Please.
No, I will let you finish, but you've already finished that bit, so I'm asking you about it. How is Sadiq Khan undermining the safety? How is the politician Sadiq Khan, who's in receipt of more death threats than any other politician in the country, undermining the safety of politicians?
Right. So basically, he was talking bad of Mark Field for his actions last night. I worked in Africa and I've done all my security training, all of my close protection.
I just need a little bit more. Sorry, Daniel. I need a little bit more because I've seen some of the stuff that Sadiq Khan receives. I'm doing an event with him next week.
Okay, I'm not talking about we're talking about the Mark Field situation.
No, but you said Sadiq Khan is undermining the safety of politicians.
Because of his words in the media this morning.
What did he say? I haven't seen it.
Well, he was talking about his handling of him and he should actually resign from his position. That's what he said.
And how is that undermining the safety of politicians, Daniel?
So let me finish. If you saw the situation last night, that woman approached Mark Field. She didn't. She was trying to get past him. Yeah. She had a bag at chest height that they had a concealed weapon in it. If she would have pulled out a pistol and put a bullet through his head, the headlines would be completely different today.
Daniel, are you high?
That most politicians are subject to minimum amount of security training. And
so why do you think he's apologised?
But we're saying
why do you think he's apologised unreservedly?
Yeah, because he's probably worried about his job, and most politically correct people are slagging him off. When in reality, people shouldn't even be breaching the security. And if someone had put a bullet through his head, can you imagine what would have happened then?
Mate, I presume that you're a fully functioning adult human being, but you're talking
absolutely
about an entirely theoretical scenario where it's okay to.
It's not theoretical. They breach security, as you said.
No. The gun. Do you know what theoretical means, Daniel?
Yes, absolutely.
Right, so you said if she'd put a bullet in his head. You understand why that is a theoretical situation?
It is. But
yes. So why have you phoned up to talk to me about something that hasn't happened when I've invited you to come and talk to me about something that has happened?
Right, okay, but if it...
No, you're not going to answer that, so I'll ask you, again, just because I've let you finish now, could you explain to me how the politician in the United Kingdom who is in receipt of more death threats and security concerns than any other is somehow endangering the safety of politicians? Take your time.
Okay, so he's saying that it's perfectly acceptable for people to intrude on.
He hasn't said that, though, Daniel. Now you're actually lying.
No, he said that he should resign.
No, but when did he say it was perfectly acceptable for people to march into private functions and protest?
Okay, so it's not perfectly acceptable for people
No,
to
so that was a lie. So let's go back to the question. How is the British politician in receipt of more threats than any other? And have you hung up, Daniel? You see, this is what happens. And I'm going to return to the rhetoric of picking a side. So if you think you're on Daniel's side, just look at him. Lying, embarrassing himself, endorsing violence against women, using a phrase like politically correct, talking about something that hasn't happened at all in order to somehow justify something that has happened, and metaphorically soiling himself live on national radio. Why would you want to be on his team, whatever the parameters of that team may be?
Rosanna has called from Sunningdale. Hello, Rosanna.
Hi. I wanted to say something that literally in the course of 2 shows, 2 different presenters already have said. But I will first say it's breaking my heart listening to all these callers. And it seems to be most of the callers so far in your show, at least, that have...
We are getting people calling in, and we're putting them on, who are saying, broadly speaking, what I'm saying, or adding different reflections on it, but the same point. But it is dispiriting. You're right. The number of people, women, fathers of 3 young daughters, saying that it's appropriate. Can't quite believe my ears, really.
Yeah, I know. But the thing I wanted to address, which is just, I understand we live in fractious times, and if these were protesters from a group akin to Britain First, which the murderer of Joe Cox was part of, that would be different. There is precedent. There is evidence in the past of these kind of groups being violent. Show me some evidence that Greenpeace has ever conducted itself in any way other than non-violently.
Well, I think people... I agree with you, but I think people would argue back and say, I couldn't tell they were Greenpeace. How was I supposed to know whether they were Greenpeace or not when they were making their way to the Chancellor?
They announced themselves. They sounded a huge siren.
They could have been lying and carrying chainsaws in their tiny handbags, Rosanna.
Yes, definitely. It's very upsetting. And you know, a police officer wouldn't even remove a peaceful protester in that way, even one committing, when you engage in civil disobedience, you are engaging in crimes, so you expect to be removed. To be stopped and removed, Yeah, and I am somebody who is, I'm disabled, but I am still prepared to, and I expect that there will be times when I will feel some pain from the removal, but that I accept. What people don't expect and accept is violence like this, that was disproportionate, unnecessary, and if you see that there's somebody has got some stills from the video, and there's one of his face as he passes the camera, and his eyes he looks excited.
The word I used last night on Twitter about it was relish. There's relish in it.
And actually, that's the other point, is I believe he did this because he has already wanted violence against us. There is a letter, I can tweet it to the LBC page, that he wrote to the Met asking for a crackdown of the Extinction Rebellion protests, even though the police were already removing people in an absolutely appropriate and proportional way that they couldn't have gone farther from. So any further crackdown he was asking for would have been something inappropriate. He didn't get that. He's obviously got issue with us, and so when this person came, he reacted differently to other people because he's already got that issue.
He'd had enough. Rosanna, stay with me, because Michael has called from Taunton and sees things very differently to you and to me, and I wonder whether you might... I mean, I've been doing it all afternoon to try and find common ground, but I've failed so far. Michael in Taunton, hello.
Hi, Sheila. Good to speak with you again. You say relish and look forward to the challenge that he had. That's subjective. I would say indignant and frustrated with what was going on. if you want to walk towards the minister in that way at a private function with determination, then you need to expect to be manhandled.
Why did nobody stop the man who got 2 inches to Theresa May? Why did nobody stop the man in this fashion, I mean, who stood right next to Esther McVey and managed to find time to make a very angry speech on stage at the launch of her leadership campaign?
Well,
I wonder what the difference is, Michael.
You asked that question to those people,
Yeah, but what do you think the difference is? Might it be that one of them was a woman and one of them wasn't?
Oh, you guys have a perverted mind when you want to make this against women.
No, I don't. I really don't.
Yes,
but if somebody is 6'3" and built like a shed, do you think Mark Field would have done the same? And do you know why? The answer is probably, well, he might have tried, but he wouldn't have been able to. And when I say it's because it's a woman, a woman certainly of Esther McVey's size, certainly of Theresa May's size and heft, wouldn't have a chance against a man who decided to move her.
Well, listen, ma'am, you put yourself in that position where you are gate crashing a private function. You shouldn't be there doing that in the first place. Then you should accept the consequences.
Rosanna, go on, answer that.
As a man,
excuse me, give me a moment.
Can I finish?
Well, you're going over a point I've already addressed.
And I'm going to address another point. I
expect to be removed. I expect for people to put their hands on top of my arms and on my back and push me in a way that doesn't put me off my balance towards the exit. I expect and accept that. I know
you have some great expectations, ma'am, in unreasonable circumstances.
No, I have the expectation.
You need to behave yourself to have
legal.
your expectations respected. You put yourself in a high security situation like that in today's climate. It could have been a lot worse. I'm sure if that had been the president of the United States or say Benjamin Netanyahu, you would have probably been jumped on by his security people, and rightly so. You need to behave yourself when you make protests and not behave in such a way.
Advancing in a way that it was dangerous. Also, the other point that nobody has spoken about so far and is driving me mad is this is Greenpeace we're talking about. They announced themselves with a siren, with speakers.
Well, if you
Greenpeace
just because you're Greenpeace makes no difference. You want to behave in an aggressive way. She was walking with intent to the minister.
Hang on a sec, Rosanna. Why does it make no difference? If somebody, Michael, if I agree with you, it makes no difference about the consequence of them being made to leave from the private event. I get that. And being made to leave against their own wishes. But if they come into a room and say, Greenpeace, climate change, still not enough being done, we've got leaflets we want to hand out, what is so violently threatening about that?
Listen, the intent with the lady was walking extremely fast towards the minister. That needs to be stopped.
I agree it needed to be stopped. Rosanna knows it. No, but Michael, you're saying something.
As a security issue,
all right,
as an ex-armed forces man as well.
Got one of those.
I am not looking at who they call themselves.
All right.
I am looking at their actions.
Yeah. But listen, Rosanna and I both agree that the protester can expect to be removed. It's the manner of the removal that we question.
I thought for a man who's untrained, he dealt in a very appropriate way. The only point I would make, the hand on the back of the neck, unfortunate, and with hindsight, not to have done that and use his hands on her shoulders and move her away.
And when you tell Rosanna...
He stopped her with reasonable force.
Okay.
He stopped her with reasonable force.
When you tell Rosanna that she needs to behave herself, what do you mean?
Well, people don't have the right to gate crash in such a way. If you want to protest outside. That's not your property, for one thing. That point's already been made. You're putting yourself in a highly confrontational situation against the minister. So it's not your right to go into... In fact, I wonder why these people can't be prosecuted for behaving in the way they did.
Rosanna?
Like that.
Well, somebody was recently giving community service for throwing a milkshake at Nigel Farage, which I hate him, but I don't hate him, I dislike him, but I do not condone that. So if you can get, prosecuted for throwing a milkshake, that, something should happen to Mark Field. You can't, because most police officers would not handle a protest that way. And this is what I'm saying. You're not even listening to us. Nobody listens to anybody anymore. I mean, Sheila, this is just heartbreaking.
I hear a lot of bleating going on in today's self-righteous attitude from many people.
Well, you know what? Actually, there is something to be self-righteous about the fact we're fighting for the future of his children, your children, everyone's children. And if you reject...
Yeah, I wondered how long it would take for you to bring the children in as well. Let's play on the emotions. Let's bring in the children.
Well, it is quite an emotional matter, isn't it? The damage to the climate and the damage to the planet. I feel quite emotional about it.
Well, people need to control their emotions and act in an appropriate adult way instead of thinking they have rights to go into such events.
People need to control their emotions. I cannot believe, Michael, I cannot believe that you have just spent 5 minutes telling Rosanna to behave, telling me I'm seeing things that aren't there. And you have just said you've been defending a man who pushed a woman in her chest, shoved her shoulder against a pillar,
let's make
grabbed
a point
her.
about her breasts now.
I'm absolutely, I am.
That's a part of the body that.
Hang on. You have been defending. You have been defending a man.
Perverted mind.
I do not. You have been defending a man.
Focus on the breast.
No.
You need to cut it out,
what's perverse about breasts? It's just part of the body.
That's a part of the body that any person goes to stop someone, the upper chest. Now, you want to make it a focus of breast.
Well, okay.
That's just the wickedness of your mind.
Oh, my mind is wicked. But the point I'm trying to make, and you're trying to attempt to stop me from making it, but I'm going to make it, Michael. You have just spent 5 minutes saying that this violence towards that woman was appropriate because of the circumstances. And then you say that Rosanna, or anyone who feels emotional about the damage to the planet, needs to be less emotional, needs to control their emotions. The man himself has accepted he didn't control his emotions. He's apologised for what he did and said it was too much. He didn't control his emotions.
No reason to apologise, but that's the pressure you guys would put on him.
Did he control his emotions?
The Prime Minister.
Did he control his emotions?
I believe he did. Could have been a lot worse. Could have been a lot worse.
What do you mean?
She never stumbled. She never fell to the ground. She kept her balance. He pushed her against.
No, she did not.
Well, that's not what I saw from the video.
Oh, Jesus. I mean, this is painful. This
there's
really
no need
is
to
painful.
blaspheme as well. There's no need to blaspheme the name of Jesus Christ, ma'am. Leave him out of it, if you don't love him.
You care about the use of a word. When you
because I care. I'm a Christian, so I care about my Lord Jesus Christ.
Dying because
so don't use his name as a curse word if you don't mind.
We're talking about. This is now.
Let's leave it there. I think we'll leave it there because some people will be offended by the use of the word Jesus in that way. But that's I think a bit of a sideshow to this conversation. Rosanna, thank you. Michael, thank you for your time as well. Oh, there was a lot in that, wasn't there?